Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's great to have you with us today in this webinar, which is the third of a series of monthly webinars we are holding this year. Logz.io's customer success team is always at your service, and we would like to make sure you guys get any training and support you need to utilize Logz.io's platform to the fullest and be successful. I'm Boaz Arbel, Head of Customer Success at Logz.io, and with me today we have Greg Lucas, Solution Architect and Customer Success Engineer, and two special guests, Alan Manos, Platform Operations Manager from SiteSpect here in Boston, and Brett Elsmore, DevOps Manager at Disco.io from Utah. Both Alan and Brett will share with you today their insights and experience of setting up and using alerts in Logz.io platform. And Greg will then walk you through some practical how-to tips and tricks so you can all use in your environments right after the webinar. We also have with us Eric Alfano, our customer care engineer, who's waiting for any questions you may have. So please go ahead and send your questions to us as they come. Just before we kick this webinar off, let me tell you that other than just learning something new today, you can also win some cool prizes. I don't want to spoil it, so I'll tell you more about it at the end of this session. I want to wish you all a successful webinar. Greg, please take it away from here. Good luck.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. Before we kick it off, I just want to reiterate reaching out to our support. So as you all know, Logz.io, coming with all of your packages as customers, you get 24/7 chat support, as well as a dedicated customer care team that's also reachable by email at help@logz.io, and there's also a self-support site at support.logz.io. Now, this morning, what we're going to do is the agenda is we're going to have a conversation with Brett Elsmore, who is a DevOps manager at Disco.io, and then Alan Manos, who's sitting here in the room with me in Boston. And then we're also going to go into building out 2 alerts, both creating and managing those alerts, and then we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. Now, one of the first things that I'm going to send out is actually a poll, and I wanted to gather just some information from the audience who's currently leveraging alerting with Logz.io. So for the next couple of seconds here, I have an alert running that's going to collect a poll and some information. Going to leave it up for 5 more seconds, and then I'll close the poll. Okay. All right. So I'm going to actually share the results here. So currently, 36% of attendees leverage alerting with Logz.io, and 64% of you do not. Some of that may have to do with the fact that we have some non-customers joining the webinar today, but this is a great learning opportunity to figure out how to leverage alerting best properly in your environment with your organization. So thank you for answering that first poll. All right. So I'm going to introduce Brett from Disco.io. So Brett, if you could come on and introduce yourself and explain what your role is at Disco and what Disco does.
Sure, you bet. Thanks, Greg. My name's Brett Elsmore, and I'm with Disco.io. And today we run a relatively small team, but we're looking forward to not only leveraging Logz.io, but different other technologies to make solutions for our customers.
Sure, thank you. And what's your role exactly, Brett? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sorry, I'm the manager of our DevOps team.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Brett, you guys have been a customer for about 6 months now. We remember working with you in the beginning of the sales process and your onboarding process to Logz.io. And one of the things we had initially covered, and I'd like to share with the rest of the audience, is how did things used to work before you were able to alert on your log data?
Boy, that's a good question, Greg. So initially, before we actually started using Logz.io, our applications would create logs so quickly that we didn't really have any time to do any sort of triage. A lot of times the logs were either they've rolled or they were deleted because we have to purge them so quickly. So there was really no insight when we were trying to track down issues.
Okay, great, awesome. And then how are you guys leveraging alerting with Logz.io currently today?
Well, actually, we have several different alerts that we're using, but it allows us to be much more proactive when we are trying to look at different types of situations within our environment. Some of them, might just be informational, but a lot of them we use as a critical alert that we have to actually respond to and have it escalate through some sort of notification like a pager duty or something like that.
That's great. Yeah, and what is the escalation policy? I guess how does that work internally for Disco?
So it's a good question. So currently right now, although we don't have quite a rotation schedule, it usually hits myself and my team initially, and depending on the management structure on our engineering side, we include them as well. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, it really depends on the severity.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Now, final question. What would it mean if you guys lost alerting capabilities based on the usage today?
I feel like we would kind of go back in time the way we used to do it, which was a lot of firefighting and scrambling, and it was very high stress. And when you're in that high stress environment, it's not healthy.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Now, Brett, I did want to dive into your account today, and we were going to look at 2 of the example alerts that you guys are leveraging with Logz.io, and was wondering if you could share with the audience the exact usage with those alerts that are triggered. So I remember one of the first ones we discussed was this alert called API return time. And just kind of wonder if you can talk through this story and what the example is there.
Sure, you bet. So we have an external monitoring tool that just really checks the health of we have 2 entry points into our system. One is just our main website, and another one is a tools, what we call our tools portal. And we were getting some notifications that things were timing out. And that led us to do kind of something really kind of cool that was new to us, but it was probably something that Logz.io does every day. But as we were grabbing that log information, there was a certain field that we wanted mapped that contains an integer that we care about, which is just milliseconds. And Greg, I think you actually helped me with this, but we were able to map that to a specific field, and then if that number exceeded a certain value, then we would trigger this alert. And what that allowed us to do is, and I mean, we have several hundred of different type of API calls, but what this really kind of allowed us to do is narrow it down to a specific section of the system, right? It was in this case, it was database related. We had some long running queries that were affecting, it was a cascading effect, right? So one would come in and then it would just kind of keep compounding the issue. And so it provided insight for us into how that worked.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember one of the things we had done was actually initially a parsing request to take that data out of the log message, put it into its own field, so that you can alert on that specifically. That's kind of a message I want to deliver to the rest of the audience, is that we can extract any values from your raw message data, put them into fields, allowing you to create alerts such as this. Awesome, great. Now, this next one specifically, this one's interesting, Brett. This one, rejected execution exception. Again, we talked about this one last week. What does this one mean to you specifically?
So this one, it actually was correlated to the one prior to this, but this one was really interesting because we noticed it as we were digging through some of the information that was related to the API execution time, and noticed some patterns. And the pattern was this: on occasion, we had put in this new mechanism that said, hey, if there's a delay, let's go ahead and back off and retry. Well, that mechanism was flawed in that it was actually resubmitting the same type of work, which created 2 jobs that ended up creating this null pointer exception. So working with the engineering team, we discovered that we actually, through our approach just of the way we implemented it, it wasn't accurate. And so this alert actually provided access and acknowledgement into that type of activity. Now I will tell you, this was marked as a critical, even though we've bumped it down to medium. You can see here, but this was something that was very critical that we had to monitor for quite some time. So this was a very valuable alert for us.
Absolutely, and I noticed both of these. So this alert specifically is coming to your email address, so you have a personal attachment to this one specifically.
Sure, and that could be, and sometimes we don't have it now. I demoted it, but it would also have a PagerDuty integration that I could have it call my phone.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Brett, thanks for sharing with us today some of your usage with Logz.io and specifically geared around the alerting capabilities. I'm gonna now jump over to Alan. Before I do that, I do want to send out another poll. I'm actually curious to hear from the audience what endpoints you're actually leveraging with your alerts. So I'll leave this poll open for the next 20 seconds here. And if the audience could answer, so you see the examples on the screen: email, Slack, PagerDuty, VictorOps, or other.
And if you're not using anything, please just ignore.
Yep. If you're not leveraging alerting capabilities or you don't have any endpoints configured, no need to answer. Okay. I'm going to close the poll. So it looks like 71% of our audience is using email. 35% are leveraging Slack. 13% are leveraging PagerDuty. VictorOps was an entirely new endpoint that we released a few months ago. That's an automated endpoint that you can configure with just a few service keys. And then other might be services like HipChat, OpsGenie, or some sort of other webhook endpoint. So I do want to make aware if an endpoint's not listed in our configuration through the alerts page, you can connect to any webhook on your side to create some sort of automation. Great, awesome. Now I'm going to pass the ball to Alan. He needs to be a presenter. So hold on one second. Good to go. Great, awesome. All right, so Alan, if you actually do you mind turning on you have your camera on?
Oh, sure.
Cool, that'd be great. So Alan is actually sitting in the room across from me in the Boston office. So Logz.io is at 263 Summer Street in Boston, Massachusetts. Our headquarters is in Tel Aviv, Israel. So lucky to have a customer locally that could join us for this morning. So Alan, if you could explain what SiteSpect does and what your role is there specifically.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. So I manage the platform operations group at SiteSpect. SiteSpect is a leading solution for testing and customer experience optimization. We are a massive reverse proxy. We handle anywhere from 15 to 30,000 requests per second, and we log all of it, which means that we're shipping a tremendous amount of data to Logz for analysis and, of course, alerting.
Great. Awesome. And then I guess, from your perspective, you guys have been a customer for a while now. How did things used to work before you were able to alert on your log data?
So we had our own internal ELK stack, and managing it was admittedly not one of our competencies. I remember my first week in the on-call rotation after joining SiteSpect, so maybe a month or two in, I got woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I think it was a Wednesday. Very rude alert blasting on my phone, and turned out that we had a log ingestion problem. Log ingestion had fallen over and had recovered on its own, thankfully. However, that resulted in a flood of mistimed log entries, which created a false non-actionable alert. And there's nothing worse than an alert that you can't take action on.
Of course, absolutely. So I guess, so how are you guys leveraging alerting today with Logz.io?
So we're using a lot of the built-in alerting features, and we're actually doing a lot of our own alerting, leveraging your guys' really robust and diverse API.
Okay, can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So I have an alert brought up here. So I mentioned that we're a gigantic proxy. So as you can see here, this is an alert that goes to my team, Platform Operations. It's for a spike in 500 level errors. We have a bunch of data centers around the world, so we're grouping them by data center, which is server grouped for us, as we've named the field in our logs. You can see that this alert goes to OpsGenie. and basically tells us that we've had a problem, whether it's us or the backend web server that we're trying to proxy to is something that requires investigation. So this is an actionable alert. And generally, the action that we take following receiving this alert, either my team or another team, we have a number of 500 level error alerts. My team or another team might go to this dashboard here. And what's cool about this dashboard is you can sort based on customer ID, based on a data center. Real quick, I can give you just a quick example. So looking at a data center for the last 15 minutes might show that there are, this is, the prior view was looking at a single customer, looking across a data center. It's actually, given the amount of traffic we're serving, this is a very low level of proxy errors. This dashboard will tell us a lot about it, including generally what the cause was when you correlate all of the data that is being presented here. The next logical evolution for us is actually to leverage Logz.io's built-in notification system. They have deployed this incredible template system whereby we are going to be able to email our customers directly when we detect an origin issue, when the proxy issue is on the customer's web server. So we can be more proactive around notifying our customers that they're having a problem.
Sure, absolutely. And one of the things we've noticed is you guys leverage the API and you generate your tokens per customer.
Yes.
And that's how you gear these dashboards and are able to share data with them.
Absolutely.
Great, awesome. Final question. What would it mean to you if you lost alerting capabilities?
Similar to Brett, I mean, it would feel like going back in time. You know, we want to be proactive. You never want to be behind the ball when it comes to alerting. Just the ability to be out in front of the customer, like I indicated with the templated email distributions, it'll give us the ability to be proactive, and we have the opportunity to let our customers know when their systems are not performing optimally, which is a value add for our customers, not just for us.
Sure. Awesome, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us this morning?
I mean, so for people who are growing their alerting programs, as you do that, you'll find that the Logz.io API is really powerful and really valuable, and you can deliver data. It's a RESTful API, so we're using a bunch of Python automation to query the API and do some more, I hesitate to call it advanced, but more complex data crunching. We're doing a lot more trend analysis and just more analytics on the actual data itself that's driving even more meaningful and, of course, actionable alerting.
Sure.
So, and if people have questions about that, happy to answer anything with regards to that or any other questions.
Right, and I think we'll probably have some questions towards the end of the webinar. Yes, this morning. Awesome. Well, thanks for the time this morning, Alan. Thanks for giving us a demonstration of how you guys are leveraging alerting with Logz.io.
Glad to be here.
I'm going to take back control of the screen, and we're going to continue talking about configuring alerts in your account. So let's just go over a few things before we jump into a demonstration of building a few example alerts within Logz.io. So building an alert within Logz.io is as simple as defining your query, defining your definitions. Your action represents your endpoint. So what's the target? Is it going to go to an email address? Is it going to go to a service like Slack or PagerDuty? And then obviously, what's the trigger, right? So what's the threshold at which an alert should fire within your accounts? The screenshot in the middle is actually showing an alert firing to a Slack channel. So one of the examples we're going to go through today is an alert based on excessive number of 500s going off in your environments. And then finally, the actual endpoint configuration. So we have our out-of-the-box configurations for both PagerDuty, Slack, Big Panda, Datadog, and VictorOps. But again, as I mentioned earlier, you can connect to any service that has a webhook available as an endpoint. This is just a screenshot showing defining the query. So the process of creating an alert within Logz.io, you define your query in Kibana, and that can be done both with the filters or the free text search. As you all notice in your Logz.io account, there is a create alert button to the right of the search bar. That is something that Logz.io has added on top of ELK as a service. And then the alert definition is made up of your name, your action, your trigger, and then even your output, which I'll go over to once we're in the product. Actually managing alerts. So at the top of the application, there is an alerts page, and this gives you high level detail about each alert. With each alert, you can actually contribute that alert to LGAPs. For those that do not know, LGAPs is a community-driven library of Kibana objects, so things like searches, visualizations, alerts, and dashboards. This is especially common for some of the more common log types, so things like Apache, Nginx, IIS, etc. If you've not explored it, I highly recommend checking out LGAPs after this webinar. All right, and now I'll go into the demonstration of the product. Okay, so just give me 1 second. You can see my screen okay? It's in the demo account. All right. So this is the first screen. So when you first log into Logz.io, this is Kibana. This is your Discover tab. Now let's go through an example of defining an alert within Logz.io. As I mentioned, the first alert we want to build is based on 500, the number of 500s. Now we have this response field to find out, and we can see a breakdown right there. Some 200, generally across the board, we see majority 200 responses, but there are some 500s in here. So one of the things we want to do is let's actually create a filter based on the response 500, and we're just going to modify this. Now what we can do is we can actually click the pencil icon, and this is something that was available as an upgrade to Kibana 5.5.3 that allows you to actually modify a filter after it's been added. And so what we want to do is we actually want to specify, we want to look everything on the response field that's between 500 and 599. So we get every 500 level response. Now when I hit save, it'll update the context of this query. And if I update and we start looking at all the 500s over the last 15 minutes, and let's just say we want to look at all the 500 responses over the last 24 hours, that'll update the context of this search, and we can get a general idea based on this histogram above your log search what the general pattern is of 500 errors occurring in our environment. And this is broken down into 30-minute timestamp intervals. So if we just look across the board here, we'll just say, just for the purpose of today's webinar, that the average number of 500 errors coming in over a 1 hour period, let's just call it 300. And we want to create an alert. If it exceeds that number, we want to get an alert to one of our endpoints. So because we have a filter defined and Discover within Kibana, we can go ahead and click the Create Alert button. And what that does is it brings us to the alert creation screen. And so what you'll see is that it automatically pulls in the filter to that screen. If we had defined a query within Kibana, it would pull that text in there as well. So we could actually physically have written out response colon and then a square bracket 500 capitalized to 599. So same thing as actually leveraging the UI within Kibana. So we'll title this alert excessive 500s. We could have a description here that maybe is a set of instructions to actually go and actually fix this. This might be sent to someone internally who is not familiar with the systems yet. So this is a great way to be proactive and set a process for yourself internally. I mentioned our endpoint, so we could choose an endpoint. So this could go to an email address. This could go to a service like Slack, PagerDuty. When you actually click on this, it'll populate the list of email addresses, but you also have the ability to select those channels in which they go to. And then we said the trigger, right? So we want to get triggered if this number of events, and we said 300, right, within a 1 hour period, and we want to get an alert. Now, as part of an upgrade recently within Logz.io, we had tiered alerting. So by default, when you first create an alert, there's going to be a medium severity level assigned to it. This is actually sent as metadata as part of the alert, so you can actually tie this in and trigger with some sort of automation. Now, if I want to add a second level, let's just say it exceeds 400 within a 1 hour period. Maybe we want to assign a high severity alert to this and trigger those systems as necessary. Things like this can be maybe it routes to a different individual in the organization. Maybe it's a different team. Maybe it's perhaps maybe a different channel. And then finally, the last configuration available within the alerting screen is the ability to define the output. So by default, all of your alerts are output the full JSON payload from that alert. If we select custom format, what that allows us to do is actually allows us to send the actual fields that we want associated with it. So maybe we want to send the client IP as part of that data. So what are the hosts that actually trigger those 500s in the first place? You can add as many columns to this table as necessary. So this was delivered to your Slack channel. This was delivered to email. You have a nicely formatted table coming across with that alert. Once I'm done configuring the alert, I go ahead and hit create. It creates that alert within my account, and then I have it in this list here. As I had mentioned earlier, right, we have the ability to contribute an alert. We can edit it. We can actually just delete that alert entirely. You also have the ability to quickly enable and disable an alert. So maybe there's an alert that's firing too much within one of your accounts, but you don't want to delete it from the list of alerts in your account. You could quickly disable it on the fly. Awesome. So that's an example of an alert doing values between 500 and 509 on the response field. The next example that I'm going to go through is actually building out an alert based on a custom log coming into one of our applications here. So I actually went ahead and pre-created an alert, pre-created a search here. So I just go ahead and open this up. The example of this search that I opened up is actually based on an issue that's we're having an issue querying our database. So there's actually an error in our SQL syntax. So a few things that I've actually predefined here. You'll notice that I've defined the type, which is my secret app. This could represent all the logs coming from one of my applications directly into Logz.io. We've actually parsed out the error field, so we're looking at only errors, and then we're looking for this specific string, this error querying database. Now, what you'll notice is I wrapped that text in quotes. So we're looking for that exact match on that string, and then you'll notice the search below represents that data. Now, if we look over the last 24 hours, one of the first things you'll notice is we have about 172 hits. And again, we'll look on this timestamp here. We average around, it looks like, 20, let's call it 25 within that 30-minute time period. So let's just say we want to get alerted if it's happening more than 20 times within 30 minutes, that example here. So again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click the Create Alert button. It's going to automatically pull both the filter, the string, and then we can go ahead and define this alert. So we can call this SQL syntax error. Again, we could define a set of instructions. So maybe this is something that goes to your database administrator and has them have them investigate, what this issue does. This might go directly to their email address again, or to another service that you have defined in your environment. And then we said we wanted to get alerted. This happened more than 20 times within a 30-minute period. And again, we could define the output, custom format. One thing I did want to point out is you'll notice there's an option on the actions here. This is suppress notifications. What this allows you to do is say, okay, we only want this notification to come to our endpoint once per hour. And it'll actually aggregate all the data from all those alerts within that single alert once per hour. So this is a great way to control this. You can actually control alert fatigue within your environment, so that you're not overloading both your systems and then your employees in your organization. I go ahead and click create, and now that alert is defined within my account. So then it would go to my endpoint as necessary. So that's all I have for a demonstration. I think we're gonna move on to Q&A now. I think we're taking some things across the wire. Boaz and Eric are in the room with me, so we're gonna go ahead and look at the first set of questions. So one of the first questions that was asked was, can I send alerts to both my email and Slack channel at the same time? The answer is yes, absolutely. So on the alert creation screen, when you set up the trigger, you type in the email address you want. If you tab out of it, it creates that email address, and then you can select as many endpoints as needed per alert. Question number 2: is there an alert, and is there a limit to how many alerts can be sent? Nope, you're not limited at all on your account. So as part of getting a Logz.io Pro account, you essentially have the ability to create unlimited alerts in your account. If you did want API access, you also have the ability to manage your alerts outside of Logz.io. So you can create alerts outside of Logz.io and create automation there. We have some larger sets of customers that are leveraging that capability heavily. Do you have Kibana dashboards showing when and which alerts are triggered? So we do actually capture that information on a field. I think I'll probably send that information out after the webinar. But there's a field, I think it's captured under the type that says which alerts have been fired. And we've actually even built an alerts dashboard that I think is available in LCAPS, and that shows you which alerts have been fired. The second way is actually directly on the alerts page. So if you go to the alerts page, there's a tab called Triggered Alerts that shows when alerts were fired, and then you can actually view them within Kibana and jump directly to Kibana to see when they're actually fired in the first place. How often are alerts checked? So the way that the alerting mechanism works is it essentially runs a query every 45 seconds, and it compares it on the last interval. So if you're looking over 5 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, it'll look at all the events based on your query on that interval. What does the group by do? So that's a great question. So we brought up the example of looking at the 500 errors. Now let's just say we wanted to get an alert of the number of 500 errors, but per host, for example. That's exactly what that do. So the example there is I might add my group by as either maybe the client IP or either the host name, and then we can get an alert. So we want to get alerted if a specific host exceeds 2,500s within a 30-minute period, based on the example we went over today. Again, any more questions, you can either come to the support chat. If you're an existing customer, leverage your customer success engineer, or also email help@Logz.io. Can I see the events that caused the triggered alerts? Yes, absolutely. I brought up before. If you go to the triggered alerts screen, you can actually click on the View in Kibana link, and it'll jump to the events that actually triggered that in the first place. Secondarily, if you're going to an endpoint like Slack or email, there is a View in Kibana link that actually jumps you directly from those endpoints as well. What is the optimizer? So data optimizer is actually a totally separate feature from alerting. Essentially what it does is it allows you to save small subsets of your data that you can store in an account over a longer period of time. So as part of sign up for Logz.io, you actually have a time-based retention plan. So an example is you have 10 gigs of log data that you generate per day, and then you want to be able to search that data over a 14-day period. What Data Optimizer allows you to do is actually store those subsets. So just maybe the metrics. If you want a unique count of the number of 500 errors over a year-long period, you can store that information within your count. Okay, that's actually separate. It's a separate plan from your time-based retention plan. Again, you can either work with your account team or your customer success engineer if that was something you're interested in leveraging. The grayed out schedule option is actually that specifically within the alert creation screen. So that was a question that was brought up by an individual on the webinar. So as part of enabling Data Optimizer, schedule basically allows you to configure what the aggregation is. So how often do you want to aggregate that data into that timeless account? Next question was, can I run an alert on a sub-account data from the main account? Yes, absolutely. So as part of configuring your accounts, in the Manage Accounts tab, one of the things you can configure is the ability to make that data searchable from the main accounts. If that option is turned on and then you create your alert in the top level account, you can absolutely query on that data in the lower level account and create alerts based off that information. Secondarily, if you also want to add tags to be able to search on data within those sub-accounts, you could absolutely create alerts, right? So you could do, for example, a group by on that data within each sub-account. How will an alert with different severity work if all three have reached their threshold? So that essentially what it's going to do is it's going to hit the first tier. It'll assign a severity as it reaches every tier after the fact. It'll reach that threshold within the time period. I think that's something we maybe want to explore based on your use case. If that's an existing customer, please reach out to your customer success individual in the account team. We can work with you on configuring that specifically. Let's say we want to send an alert to a Slack channel for every log entry of error log level. We want the ability to prevent alerting to specific exception messages we already know about, maybe marking them somehow. So what you would do is you could filter out that data either with the filters or within the search term itself. You can define a not. So available with querying within Logz.io it's actually another webinar topic we're going to be covering over the next few months. The query bar actually supports full Lucene search. So you would actually simply just define capital NOT, not, and then whatever items that you want to actually filter out from the alert, so it doesn't fire on that.
I can actually give a quick example of that. So for the proxy error alert that I demonstrated, we're filtering out particular bot traffic so as to avoid noise that would be generated by that type of log entry. We don't want to alert on that. Again, it's about driving actionable data and behavior.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Alan. I appreciate that. Next question. When suppressing alerts, are you delaying the initial alert until its aggregate hits over the time period for the initial alert? When suppressing alerts, are you delaying the initial alert until it aggregates? So the way that the suppression works is that we're going to, again, so we're basically running the query every 45 seconds. If that alert fires, let's just say an alert fires based on it meets the trigger threshold, that'll fire and it'll basically reset the timer. So we have suppression turned on for an hour. We're not going to get another alert for at least another hour. If another alert fires within that hour time period, it's going to be aggregated to that next alert. Cool. Are there any other questions from the audience? We have about 8 minutes left, and Boaz wanted to deliver a closing statement, and then we actually have a challenge for the audience of today's webinar.
All right. So thank you very much so far for the questions you submitted. And did you add any?
There's a couple more questions coming in.
Oh, so we see there are a couple more questions. So let's take a look at them. All right. Want to take that, Greg?
How can I try an alert before enabling it?
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a great question. So one of the things I prefaced in the beginning was defining a query based on alert criteria. So obviously making sure that the data is there if that's what you're testing it against. And you could absolutely have that kick off to maybe an email address, for example. That's a great way. A lot of customers, when we do onboarding processes, are testing their alerts so that they don't overload one of their endpoints. Just as an example. So I highly stress making sure that the data is there. So leveraging the search capabilities within Logz.io and making sure the data is there first. So I brought up this example here of looking for our SQL syntax error, right? So we're looking within our application logs, at level error, and then for the specific string error querying database. If it's a set of data that is going to be there, again, it's a little tougher to test, but you can absolutely define alerts if data is not present in the account.
On the endpoint side of that, you could also configure a separate escalation chain in your alerting program to, if you want to be able to test, say, PagerDuty or another alerting app, you could build a test alerting escalation chain so that it still delivers to PagerDuty but doesn't blow up your on-call engineer's phone.
All right, great. Brett on the line. If you have any further comments or anything to answer, please jump in. Feel free.
Sounds good. I think I'm good right about now.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So just before we close it, we would like to challenge you to create some real alerts, because the reason why we're doing that, guys, is to help you to better utilize the tool, right? So if you get off this webinar now and you create an alert, share it with us. Take a screenshot, send it to us at help@Logz.io, and we'll compliment you with a cool Logz.io t-shirt. And you know what? If it's really an interesting alert that we haven't seen before, and that everyone can learn of. We'll also send you an Amazon gift card. I know, what do you say, $50? Something like that. So yeah, $50. Let's make it $50, and we'll compliment you just for contributing and showing your love and helping yourself utilizing the tool. So please do that. Take the next couple of hours, create an alert, and step up your usage. So I think that's it for today. Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brad, on the line. Thanks, Greg and Eric here for taking the questions and setting them up for us. And thank you all for attending. I hope you all learned something new today. We'd love to get any feedback and comment you have. Please send it to us to help@Logz.io. The folks are waiting for you there 24/7 for any questions you have. We'll be sending you the recording of this webinar very soon, right after. And just FYI, we're holding another webinar at the end of April, and you're all welcome to let us know if there are any specific topics you'd like us to talk about. We're very attentive and trying to accommodate that. Please share with us your new alerts, as I just asked you, and we'll be happy to send you our swag and Amazon gift cards. That's it. I think we're good to go. Just take care of yourself, people out there. Take care of your logs, and let us know if we can be of any help to make you more successful. So we look forward to seeing you again.
Yes, and one other comment. I wanted to thank a few of the audience members for pointing out the deadline is April 13th, not March 13th. So that'll be coming up by the end of this week is when the deadline is.
So we're joking here in Logz.io. We are doing the impossible, but not that impossible. So okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.